Over the centuries, Ulster Scots folk have garnered a reputation for piety and politics, with strongly held beliefs and great traditions.
But what we're less well known for is our culture of storytelling and love of a good yarn, often passed down through the generations.
Many of these stories were told to pass a dark night around the fireside, tales kept for when the wains had gone to bed.
I'm Darren Gibson, writer and Ulster Scot, and there's nothing I like more than a yarn about ghosts.
And I'm David Hume, author and Ulster-Scots historian. I'm equally fascinated by these stories.
David and I share an obsession in trying to find the truth behind these folktales. What can these families tell us about the story of the White Lady? From historic castles. There's a legend about this picture, isn't there?
There is indeed, yeah.
To dark cellars.
Well, he believed that there was tunnels actually that ran onto the house.
Lonely roads.
This road is supposed to be the most haunted road in Northern Ireland.
And abandoned graveyards.
And that was the dare to come in here at Halloween at midnight and to stand in here for 1 minute inside this enclosure.
Come along with us as we try to uncover the truth behind the stories, told to make a body afeared.
Built in 1618, Galgorm Castle still stands in all its impressive splendour on the outskirts of Ballymena, County Antrim.
Over the centuries, it has had many owners. But none so infamous as a mysterious Scottish clergyman named Alexander Colvill.
Alexander had a reputation for dealing in the dark arts and witchcraft. And remember, this was a time when most people believed that witchcraft was real.
Legend has it that his brooding ghost still wanders these rooms, his slow, heavy footsteps echoing across the floorboards.
Many stories have been told about Colvill. Stories so dark and so unnerving that they've made him one of the most notorious figures in Ulster Scots folklore.
Having first come to Ireland from Scotland around 1622, Alexander was taken under the wing of his cousin, the Episcopalian Bishop Eklund of Down.
Within a year, he was ordained a priest and landed the prestigious job of chaplain to the Lord Chancellor of Ireland before gaining a doctorate in divinity. Dr. Colvill was then appointed vicar of nearby Carnmoney and later rector of Skerry parish. But he bought Galgorm independently of the church, acquiring the 21 large townlands that surrounded it around 1627.
Despite an extensive education and his status as a clergyman, a deep distrust grew between Dr. Colvill and the locals around Galgorm.
He gradually amassed a huge amount of wealth, and as well as being a harsh landlord at Galgorm, he collected taxes in the form of church tithes from his parishes. He also offered loans in a bid to increase his earnings through interest, and many people in the small rural communities would turn to him if they became desperately short on cash. The word was that Alexander Colvill had a reputation for being mean with money and also for making unreasonable demands for those who couldn't afford to repay. Many of Colvill's tenants were devout Scottish Presbyterians and would have considered this behaviour of usury to be highly immoral.
Because he was so unpopular, the story spread that he had acquired his fortune by tricking the devil. We want to establish whether Alexander Colvill really did dabble in witchcraft, or if these tales are simply a reflection of the fractious relationship between him and the community around Galgorm.
Despite the fact that the vast majority of Scots who had settled in this area were strict Presbyterians, they were also superstitious folk for whom the lines between good and evil were sharply drawn.
Why was there such a firm belief in witchcraft here among the local people in the 1600s?
Well, it was a very Scottish phenomenon, and the idea of witches and witchcraft had come from Europe into Scotland. It was embraced enthusiastically by the Scots. They really believed in a big way in terms of witchcraft, to the extent that in 1563 there was an Act of Parliament which came about, and that made witchcraft a capital crime. So when hundreds and hundreds of people started to come across from Scotland to places like this in County Antrim, it was in their psyche about witches and witchcraft. Life could be difficult for the Scottish settlers of Antrim in the 17th century, many of whom were small-scale farmers who toiled daily in the unfamiliar and often hostile landscape.
They were God-fearing people for whom the devil was very real. And so, when rumours of the dark arts started to swirl about Dr. Colvill, they spread like wildfire. So, was there some jealousy there?
Yeah, there's a very strong possibility. You just need to look at the house that he's in, the scale of it. He was quite wealthy. He had a number of people taking loans from him, and if they felt that he was charging too much on the interest and looking for too much back in the repayments, then that would be one reason why jealousy would step in, the idea that he had offended effectively the morals of all of this. As an Episcopalian, Dr. Colvill believed in the divine right of the British king to rule over both church and state. And this made him even more unpopular with his Presbyterian tenants, who believed that Christ alone should have authority in matters of religion. They were also terrified by witchcraft because they believed that it could harm them, their family, or their livelihoods in a myriad of ways.
All this combined to make Alexander Colvill a very controversial, even hated figure in the local area. Christopher Brooke is the current owner of Galgorm Castle, and he knows a thing or two about the legend of Alexander and the stories that surround him. So, Christopher, here's the man himself. Can you tell me a little bit about him?
That's definitely him. That's Dr. Alexander Colvill. Well, he arrived over in Ireland. He's from Kilross, one of the Colvilles of Kilross, arrived from Scotland. We know that he was in residence around about 1640, and he arrived with a huge amount of wealth. Now, being in the church in those days was a license to print money, because you were the person responsible for collecting a lot of the tithes and the church rents and so on. And so he used to count the money in the tithe barn at the back of the castle. And this created this myth about what he was involved in.
At the beginning of the 17th century, King Charles I ruled over England, Scotland and Ireland with full authority over the state and the established church. As an Episcopalian, Alexander Colvill was very much a follower of the king and believed in his right to rule in this way. But rumblings of discontent with the status quo began in the 1630s when Scottish Presbyterian dissenters known as Covenanters denounced Charles's divine right to rule over the church. The solemn oath to solidify their commitment to this was what was called the Covenant, and it was taken up in large numbers. These tensions continued, eventually leading to all-out war between the king and his parliament, led by Oliver Cromwell, a war that spread to Scotland and Ireland too.
He was a royalist and Cromwell was running through Ireland at that stage. So that was another reason really to create stories about this mysterious Scot who arrived with a huge amount of wealth.
And of course there's a myth about this painting, isn't there?
There is indeed, yeah. He is not allowed to leave the house, and he never has, or disaster will fall.
So we have an intriguing character. But can Christopher tell me more about the lingering ghost stories that surround this place?
We're now right up in the top of the house, an area we don't use now, and this is where Dr. Colvill used to operate from.
There's a well-known traditional local legend about Dr. Colvill haunting the house. Can you tell us how that goes?
Yes, I mean the legend very much is that he wanders round the house at night in particular, with his head bowed deep in thought.
Can primary sources and historical texts help us find the evidence we need to learn more of Dr. Colvill?
So Alexander was on a collision course with the Presbyterian authorities in his own area. And this is an interesting reference. It's from Reed's Presbyterian History of Presbyterianism, article by John M. Dixon about the Colvill family. And he quotes Reed as saying, although a Scotchman, Colvill was an eager and intolerant prelatist. He had been one of the few clergymen who joined in the petition to Strafford to impose the Black Oath on his countrymen in Ulster. The Black Oath was a vow of loyalty to the Crown imposed on Presbyterians in 1639 to ensure their obedience. As a loyal supporter of the Crown, Colvill was keen to ensure that this unpopular oath was imposed on his Presbyterian neighbours and tenants. But was Colvill's own loyalty to the king as strong as it appeared? The Reverend Patrick Adair, who was the early historian of the Presbyterian Church, he also refers to Colvill and to the presbytery calling him to answer for what are called divers unsuitable carriages, which we take to mean financial transactions. The execution of the king by Parliament in 1649 meant a changed political situation in Ireland. With the imposition of Oliver Cromwell's authority on the country, Colvill was now on much shakier ground. The English commissioners ensured the suspension of proceedings against Dr. Colvill, and they were anxious to bring over a person of his weight to the side of Parliament. And he did just that, his wealth and influence helping him to wriggle out of these charges by shifting loyalties towards the parliamentarian regime. One way Colvill was able to make himself indispensable to those in power was through his money lending, exemplified here by a letter from a well-known supporter of the parliamentarians, Sir John Clotworthy, seeking his services in 1656. John Clotworthy says, "I find money not easy to get in," suggesting that times are not good. He's been in a bit of a financial situation and he's gone to my worthy friend, Dr. Colvill. Clearly, if Sir John Clotworthy was going to Dr. Colvill for loans, then it suggests Dr. Colvill was quite a go-to person.
Here we have an enigmatic, opportunistic man who wielded influence on many fronts. We must dig deeper to find the answer to our central question. Did he really indulge in the dark arts? Alexander Colvill is not the only villain in Ulster-Scots history who was corrupted by the pursuit of money.
A horseman up the highway road, and as he comed anear, I seed his face as pale indeed as ony born on beer.
Pat Cushy Glen was a murderous highwayman about the turn of the 19th century. He would rob and murder his victims as they travelled along this desolate mountain road between the plantation towns of Limavady and Coleraine. The mere mention of his name would strike terror into the hearts of the local Ulster-Scots community. And Colerane's Bridge Street would prove to be the perfect hunting ground for Cushy Glen to spot his unsuspecting victims.
We can imagine him here, can't we? Just jerking around one of these corners, having a wee gleek to see who's a win a pound on them.
Absolutely, yeah. He would be a dodgy-looking character, I would imagine. People in the pub were, just in the mix of the crowd. They wouldn't be focused on him. He'd be invisible, effectively, but he would be watching them, and he would be seeing what money was passing hands and all of that.
So I'm standing here today, but I'm trying to get a wee sense of what this area might have been like a couple of hundred years ago. I mean, what was Coleraine and the surrounding area like back then?
By the time that Cushy Glen is operating, end of the 1700s into the early 1800s, you would have had a lot of Scots come into this area. They were very hard-working, fairly settled community, and quite a prosperous town, which is obviously where he was focused, because it was the prosperity that was what attracted him to Coleraine, of course, at the time. Cushy Glen's modus operandi was to wait for his victims to cross the River Bann in their carriage and make their way toward the aptly named Murder Hole Road, where he would be waiting in the dark of night.
So we're here because of the ghost stories. This road is full of those types of tales, isn't it?
This road is supposed to be the most haunted road in Northern Ireland. People have seen a haunted horseman. There's been audible sounds of hooves on the road, and potentially also the ghost of Cushy himself has made an appearance.
It's easy to imagine the lingering ghosts of his victims here. But how is it that Cushy Glen himself is said to haunt this road?
Well, Cushy ends up being shot himself. He attempts to steal from a man called Hopkins, and he is prepared for Cushy, and he shoots Cushy. But the story of Cushy Glen's death has an even rarer twist. Local history says that as he lay dying, Cushy Glen sent his henchmen to find a clergyman. Ironically, this outlaw who had mercilessly terrorised the Ulster-Scots community was seeking salvation, and it was a Presbyterian minister who came to his aid.
So what I'm trying to figure out, was Cushy a Presbyterian?
I don't think Cushy was a church-going type person, to be honest, first of all. But the suggestion is, Cushy's name is an unusual name, so the suggestion is that that Cushy word possibly is an Irish word. It's derived from Irish, and there's a number of families with the surname Glen down near McGilligan. So possibly was a Catholic family at the start, then became Church of Ireland. They appear in the McGilligan Church of Ireland registers.
Although he lived in a godless way, he died under the wing of the Presbyterian faith.
The Murder Hole Road was eventually renamed Windy Hill in the 1970s. But the legend of Cushy Glen still hangs heavy here, and will continue to do so for as long as his story continues to be told.
Pat Cushy Glen was a most unambiguously wretched soul. Alexander Colvill, on the other hand, hid behind a veneer of respectability. But as his vast fortune grew, so did the suspicion that it came from deviant practices behind the closed doors of Galgorm. I'm interested in this local legend, this yarn about Colvill and the devil. Can you tell me about it?
At that time, a lot of people, especially the better educated ones, were involved in alchemy, how you could, chemistry had just come about really, and how you could turn any base metal into gold. Dr. Colvill was reputed to be involved heavily in this. The legend is, while down by the River Main, he met the devil and he did a deal with the devil that for gold and knowledge, he would sell his soul to the devil.
The story goes that this deal included a boot full of gold for Colvill from the devil in exchange for his soul. But Colvill had other plans.
I'll read you a little bit from here, which tells you, which is the history of the Colvill family. Alexander cut a hole in his boot and he placed it over a second hole in the floor of his parlour, leading to the cellar below. Frustrated at the first attempt, the devil came with a fresh supply of bullion to complete the bargain, and then discovered the ruse.
So Colvill actually tricked the devil?
Well, I'll carry on. Extremely irritated, he told the doctor that he would most certainly come for him when his time was up. He then found the doctor reading a Bible by the light of a candle. Alexander pleaded to be allowed to remain so long as the candle burnt, and then he closed the Bible on the candle, frustrating the devil's intentions.
The story about Colvill was so potent that it has made its way into the rich vaults of Ulster-Scots literature. This is a poem called The Ballymena Legend. Well, yen dark night through the doctor's door, my festo the big black dog slapped in. The devil himself was at his heels, sure without a doubt that his game he'd won. I'll nick then put the dog outside, turned round and said, quoth he, now, Dr. Colvin, we man hae a talk about my fee. For you know rach well me head man be repaid when it comes to the reckoning day. What will you take and gie your soul forevermore to me? So what written evidence can we find to prove once and for all whether or not Colvill dabbled in the dark arts? David, I'm quite eager to find out what's in this scrapbook that you've brought along today.
This is a really interesting piece we have here, Darren, from a publication called Memorials, written by the Reverend Mr. Robert Law, and he died in 1689, so this is contemporary to the period we're interested in, and this will shed some light on the witchcraft issue and Dr. Colvill.
That's good, because I was starting to worry that we wouldn't find any evidence for this one.
Worry you not. We're going to go across the channel to Irvine in Ayrshire, and at the house of Major General Montgomery in 1682, a situation arose, and it tells us here there being some things of silver work stolen in that house from his lady. There is a servant woman of their own they blame for them. The lass, being innocent, takes it ill and tells them if she should raise the devil, she should know who took these things that were missed. She goes down to a cellar and supposedly she conducts some ritual which raises the devil, and the devil ends up telling her where the stolen property is. But it doesn't end there.
Ooh.
She confesses, telling them that she had learned it in Dr. Colvin's house in Ireland, who used to practice this.
Now we have a confession, and one that leads us straight back to Dr. Colvill. But proving that someone has attempted to summon the devil is a difficult task, especially when the events occurred over 300 years ago. And although this manuscript is fascinating, it is a second-hand account and could just be another story.
I have a last source to share now. It's an original document from 1682.
This is fantastic. I mean, it's a first-hand source.
This was at the hearing of this lady called Margaret Dougal.
Okay.
Margaret Dougal confessed that she had raised the devil. This rare manuscript is hugely significant because it is a first-hand account of Margaret Dougal's confession, which led her to have to answer these charges in court. Upon the 10th day of February 1682, Margaret Dougal confessed that she raised the devil. She told me, moreover, that she had been witness to the using of this art many times in Ireland, and that old Dr. Colvill learned her and several others but she never did it herself before now.
David, could this be part of the whole rumour mill that was back in Galgorm about Dr. Colvill being in league with the devil, which may have come about through jealousy or whatever? Or, I mean, what do you think about this testimony?
I think you'd have to ask why she would make this up. It's very detailed in terms of the detail of what she says she did and what happened and all of that. And the other thing that gives this credibility is we have a name.
This is an amazing document, David.
It really is, yeah.
Beyond the rumours that have endured for centuries, here at last is a document contemporary to the time that links Dr. Colvill to the practice of witchcraft. So perhaps these rumours were based on more than just festering jealousies and religious disagreements. The events that unfolded in Ayrshire open a window into the controversy that grew up around this notorious Scotsman. But can we say for certain that Colvill really was involved in magical, devil-raising practices?
He was into things like alchemy and so on, so that suggests he was inquiring into questions that people didn't have answers to at that particular time. Witchcraft was in the psyche of people, so it's possible that, yes, he had sort of crossed that line in a way. Alexander was a very canny political operator who managed to keep in with the parliamentarians before changing his loyalty again back to the Episcopalian fold at the restoration of Charles I in 1660.
David, we found out so much about Dr. Colvill. He is a real survivor.
He's one of those people in history who seems to have the natural instinct to know where to go at any particular time, and that was good for him. He survived. For the people around, it would have looked, I imagine, a bit as if he didn't have too many principles because he kept changing to diametrically opposed sides. Had Alexander Colvill not ingratiated himself with the authorities of the day, he may well have been convicted of practicing the dark arts. Instead, he lived out his days at Galgorm until his death in 1670.
On one hand, he was an outwardly respectable character, and although never convicted of anything, he is still associated with a dark rumour centuries after his death. Our investigations have revealed a fascinating insight into a time when Ulster-Scots folk were truly afeared of the devil and of the dark arts. But was Dr. Colvill in league with Old Nick? The jury is out. But the legend lives on.
O thou, whatever title suit thee, Old Horny, Satan, Nick, or Cluty, wha in yon cavern, grim and sooty, closed under hatches, spurges about the Brunstein cooty, to scod poor wretches. Hear me, I'll hang ye for a wee, and let poor damned bodies be. I'm sure sma pleasure it can gie into a deal, to scalp and scod poor dogs like me, and hear us squeal.